here in Austin. So how many of you remember that? Everybody raise your hands. Very good. And now he's gone on to start a company called Veggie Noodle Co., which makes spiral vegetable noodles that you can use like pasta. It's distributed all over the nation, and they just opened up a large production facility here in Austin, which is the second largest food manufacturer here in Austin. Very cool. And he is also a mentor at SKU. I'll tell you a little bit more about what SKU does later on. And then we have Mr. Scott Jensen, who is a serial entrepreneur, has a background in both corporate and CPG entrepreneur. So he started Stubbs Barbecue Sauce and sold that a number of years ago. I see the lovely Carrie Lum Dewey in the back, who worked with him on that. And now he is founder and CEO of Rhythm Foods, which makes delicious superfood snack foods. Started off with kale chips. So I always like to tease him and call him the kale chip king. And he is a SKU mentor as well as on our board. So welcome Scott. And then we have Adam Grossman, who has a wonderful company called Seaweed Bath Co. They went through SKU as a company, so they learned a lot of good things about how to refine their brand and take the next steps towards scaling through the program. And Seaweed Bath is a seaweed-inspired, an ocean-inspired natural products line that helps to improve the quality of your skin and do all kinds of great things for your skin. So these guys are here today to talk to you about lessons they've learned from starting and running successful CPG companies. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and start with them telling us their origin stories. So basically what it was that inspired them to become entrepreneurs and to bet on the ideas that they have. Like, how do you know when you have an idea that is worth sinking everything into? Is it just based on gut instinct? Did you do market research? Like, what was it that inspired you to start your company, and how did you get it going? So we'll start with you, Mason.
So I'm born and raised here in Austin, went to UT, and I'm actually an engineer by training, but I feel like I always had the entrepreneurial bug. In middle school, I had a candy empire and ran different things in college. So I always felt like I enjoyed doing it, and I enjoyed it mostly because I like to create things that don't exist in the world and help nurture them and help them grow. My first company, I was an engineer in college, and I got an engineering job, and it only took about 6 months for my brain to wither and almost die. And I started a landscaping company, which wasn't rocket science, but it was environmentally responsible. I have a passion for sustainability and the environment, and it taught me the fundamentals of business, of what it really takes to run a business. And I sold that company and then tried to do a chain of restaurants in Spain. So I took a pretty big jump from a little local company, and the landscaping company was I started with $5,000 and a truck, and built it to 3 crews and sold it after a couple years. And took all that money, went to Spain, thought I was going to be an international businessman, and lost everything. I lost all my money, lost my girlfriend, contracted a parasite, so I got sick as well. So in less than a year, I went from having more money than I ever knew what to do with to being broke, sick, and alone on my mom's couch. And so, it took a few weeks. I was like, what the fuck just happened? But, for better or worse, either my delusion or whatever, it never occurred to me to not go and start another company. And actually I went and peddled computers at Dell for a few months just to pay the bills while I thought what I was going to do next, and that was where Greenland came from. And Greenland was all about supporting local food systems and the last mile of our food system and getting things to the home, focus on local and organic food. Grew that all over Texas, spent 10 years doing it. It was incredibly hard and incredibly fulfilling. And once people like Instacart and Favor and everything came around, it got so competitive that I knew I had to get out of the industry. Competing with people who don't care about profitability is a really difficult thing for a seasoned company. But I'd seen brands come and go, and I got pretty good at guessing which ones were going to do well, both on my platform and in retail in general. And so when I saw a line of sight to exit Greenlane, I thought I'd love to give a product a shot, and so Veggie Noodle Co. is the fruit of that, and it has gone extremely well, better than I expected, and we're blowing and going.
Awesome. Love your story, Mason. The ups and downs. So the Stubbs Barbecue Sauce Company was kind of the first real jump into big time entrepreneurship that I did. When I was like 7 years old and going from New England back and forth to Florida and stopped in like Tennessee at a Stuckey's and saw these boxes of candy called Pop Rocks, and they were like 10 cents a piece for the package. You put them in your mouth and they crackle. No one had that in my school, so I would pick up a few boxes and sell them for like 50 cents a piece. So that was like my first entrepreneur. That was my landscaping business.
Yeah, so well, I mean, I did candy in middle school, so we both did.
Empires in
Candy
Texas
empire.
and Florida. So I guess the bug hits you at some point where you just like buy low and sell high and try to figure out the margin in between. But I went to school at SMU in Dallas and worked for an ad agency coming out of SMU. 2 years there and decided that I was going to get my MBA, so I went up to New York University, got my MBA there and started working for a big paper company. Ultimately, that paper company no longer exists, it's bought by International Paper, but I was doing marketing for Dixie Cups and Dixie Plates, and definitely wanted to do more Pop Rock stuff. Like being in the marketing side, it was like one spoke to the wheel. You weren't really involved too much in the the production side and the R&D, and we had our little slice, and that was it. So a couple of friends and I were chasing around the dream of starting a barbecue sauce company, and a guy named Stubb, who was friends of all of ours, but really close friends with one of my co-founders, John Scott, needed money. He was 6 months behind in his rent, and so we scraped up some dough and sent it to him with the understanding that we wouldn't get it back. But a few months later, he sent us some barbecue sauce and hot barbecue, counter to counter. Before 9/11, you used to be able to go up to a counter at American Airlines, give them a cooler taped up, and they would ship it to whatever location you wanted without knowing what was inside of it. And so we got this barbecue delivered, and it was hot and delicious, and we were all single, living in New York City, and we pretended we cooked it and invited all of our friends over, and the girls thought we were heroes, so the idea was born, must write a business plan. So we wrote the business plan, and meanwhile we went on to work at our various careers for a couple of years, me as a marketing guy at James River Corporation. And then finally, we had one of our friends said, yeah, we'll write you a check, the family will, if you guys quit and move back down to Texas. So that was the magic carpet ride back down to Texas, and we started with just a single bottle of barbecue sauce, Stubbs Original Barbecue Sauce, and figured out that you needed more than one bottle on the shelf to attract attention. So we doubled the black and red pepper and called it spicy, and took half of the black and red pepper out and called it mild, and then we had like our first brand block on the shelf. What we didn't know was that it was like all multi-billionaire companies. There was like 5 companies that owned the entire category. And this is long before there was like a lot of acquisitions in the CPG space. So for us, it was like, this is us forever. We're going to do this forever. So taking no from someone in a sales meeting was just the first step of getting into that store. We knew we had to develop more and more products. So over the next 20 some odd years, my partners and I, John and Eddie, and all the folks that came along on the ride afterwards, continued to develop out the brand, and ultimately just I think it was 2 years and a couple months ago, I sold it to McCormick Spice Company. But that was 5 years after I left Stubbs and started Rhythm Superfoods. So kale chips, beet chips, all kinds of new fruit and vegetable snacks coming out this next year. A whole new venture, having gained all the wisdom that I did at Stubbs. You're supposed to be able to like accelerate 10 times faster and do things more profitably and easier. And that happens in many circumstances, but in other circumstances it doesn't. So we'll dive more into that when the questions come from you, Jen. Adam.
Well, for me, much like these guys, I always was interested in entrepreneurship. So in middle school, I had a sports card and memorabilia company, and I'd travel around all around Colorado doing shows. So that's what kind of started me down that road. I moved away from it, and then graduating UT. The story of the bath company really starts then, about 6 years before I launched the business. I had a severe itch on my scalp, kind of kept picking at it, didn't think much of it. After a couple weeks, kind of spread to cover most of my head. Went to a dermatologist. She diagnosed me with scalp psoriasis, an autoimmune disorder, caused itchy, red, inflamed skin. Put me on a topical medication, put it on, went away, didn't think much of it. I moved down to South Florida for a job opportunity after college. Started working down there. After a few weeks, I get out of the shower and had kind of a severe peel on my hands and didn't really know what was going on. Went to a new dermatologist and he said, hey, now you have psoriasis on your hands, put on this ointment, put it on, went away. Everything was good. A few years later, you know, it kind of kept coming back. I wanted stronger medications. It worked for a period of 6 to 12 months. And throughout this period, I'd started a private equity fund with my brother-in-law buying distressed debt. Hated my work. And through this period, I ended up getting meningitis due to one of the drugs they put me on, suppressing your immune system. And I was at a very low point, both physically and, you know, obviously mentally. I was pretty depressed and decided if I ever got better, I would make some changes in my life. And fortunately, I got better. And I got involved in the National Psoriasis Foundation, and through my work with them and my psoriasis support group, I learned about thalassotherapy, these ocean-based treatment spas that were helping people. And it made sense to me, because if I had a day off from work, I would go to the beach and kind of chill out my skin, wouldn't be as red, as inflamed, as itchy. And as I looked into thalassotherapy and found that kind of seaweed was one of their key ingredients in these seaweed bath spas, I Googled it, and it turned out they were getting a lot of seaweed from Ireland. And then I Googled seaweed baths in Ireland, and it started there in 1912 as a niche business. And I ended up calling a few of these seaweed bath spas. There's only about 6 of them, and most of the guys I couldn't understand. But there was one lady there who moved back from the UK to open up a seaweed bed and breakfast kind of spa on in Galway, and kind of became friends with her over the phone. She shipped me 20 pounds of the seaweed she was harvesting herself and using in her bath spa. And I got in my apartment in Miami, broken into netting, followed the instructions, took a 45-minute bath, and seaweed kind of smelled, but I got out. And after a few baths, I noticed I had the same quelled look that I would have after a day at the beach. Not as red, not as inflamed, not as itchy. My girlfriend, who's now my wife and business partner at the time, said, hey, why don't you stick with it? And I did, and over the course of weeks and months, saw a big difference. Ended up handing out seaweed bath balls to people in my psoriasis support group. They had positive experience with it. I had a friend in LA who works in Hollywood. He had an outbreak of psoriasis down his leg, and he's super vain. So I sent him some seaweed, and I was like, hey Mitch, you know, it sounds nuts, but try bathing in it. And 2 weeks later, he was like, hey, can you send me more? That really helped. So I worked up the nerve in the summer of 2009, went to the National Psoriasis Foundation Conference in San Antonio. And as you can imagine, people showing up to San Antonio for a psoriasis show in the summer aren't happy with their doctors and their treatments. And I was one of them. So I was the only person, there's me and some large consumer product companies and pharmaceutical companies exhibiting. And you can even see today I still have symptoms, but at this point my symptoms that had covered about half my body had subsided significantly. And I was the only person exhibiting who actually had psoriasis. So we had a line of dozens of people wanting to come talk and try bathing in seaweed. Hadn't started a company yet. And we handed out about 300 seaweed bath balls that my wife and I had stuffed the night before. And within 3 weeks, we got about 170 responses from people who said, hey, that worked really well for my skin. Do you have a company? Do you sell? And we're like, no, no, no. We had no experience in consumer products, but saw an opportunity to really go out and do something good. And it took about 8 months, but we narrowed those 170 respondents down to 32 people around the country with psoriasis, and created a powder bath, shipped them 6 weeks worth of seaweed bathing products, and did kind of a pseudo study to see how it went. It went very well. We both quit our jobs, raised a little bit of capital, and we were in New York right around this time at my wife's friend's engagement party. And this girl next to us is like, what do you guys do? My wife's like, I'm an attorney, but I just quit. I was in finance, I just quit, we're moving to British Columbia and starting a seaweed-based personal care line. The lady looked at me and she's like, oh, my uncle's a seaweed harvester in Maine. They harvest seaweed in Maine? She's like, yeah. So we were able to get the same species of bladderwrack, or of seaweed called bladderwrack, from this guy, her uncle and his wife. And we still work with them today. It was kind of one of those things along the way that make you think, maybe I should pursue this. Needless to say, so we launched at Expo East 2010, and you know, Scott's been a great mentor for me along the way the last 7 years as we've been here in Austin, and happy to share the story. So that's my story here.
All right, thank you guys. Those are all great stories. Just as you're each talking about it, you each come from a very different place with starting the companies. But one thing that you hear kind of throughout is that there's some kind of a passion for entrepreneurship. I mean, everybody started their companies, you know, started little companies when you were kids. How many of you out there who are entrepreneurs also had small companies when you were kids? Yeah, I sold bookmarks. So, you know, we had the cars bookending here. But one of the things that you hear a lot about with entrepreneurs is you need to have passion for your product and for your company. So if you could talk a little bit about, you know, how important is passion when starting and running a company and pushing through kind of the hard spots? And then does that passion ever get in the way? So, Adam, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, you definitely need passion. I mean, we thought this was going to be an easy business. We couldn't have been more naive, to be honest. It was extremely difficult, and you kind of, after a few years of getting kind of your butt kicked, you either decide, hey, I'm going to wrap it up and go out of business, or you kind of bump along the bottom until you figure it out. So for us, I came in with this mentality of I'm going to help people with severe skin issues, psoriasis and eczema. That was my focus for the first couple years. The problem was the disconnect. I couldn't actually put that on the packaging. So while seaweed's anti-inflammatory and all these positives, I can't legally put that on the packaging. So my story versus what you'd see on the shelf didn't really resonate as well with customers. When I went through SKU, or incubation station, back in early 2014, it's my first opportunity to really do a lot of consumer research. And what we found was that most of our customers didn't exactly connect the brand with psoriasis or eczema. Instead, they have this love of the ocean. So I've been really holding on to tight my angst and kind of this, you know, wanting to help people with psoriasis and eczema who felt like I did, kind of feeling hopeless. And instead, we were connecting with this more positive imagery of the ocean. So we rebranded coming out of that, and instead of talking about the negatives of kind of my story and what I had to go through, we more focused on bringing the imagery of the ocean and the positive energy of the ocean to the products. And that's really been the change that led the company to take off. So listening to your customers, even though I started the company out of my own need, we've been able to evolve. And so when someone buys our product, it's not, hey, I'm buying this product because I have, you know, troubled skin in a negative viewpoint. It's I buy the product, it reminds me of the ocean, I love the ocean, and then I generally think of the ocean as healing. So that positive energy has really been the change. And so holding your idea pretty lightly while still being passionate and believing in what you're selling, I think needs to go hand in hand.
I think I'd also say, you know, when you're starting a business, you're also looking for financing at some point, either through your friends and family or, you know, more formal institutional financing. And from the folks that I know that get financed by venture capital or, you know, private equity firms or moms and dads that are really, really smart, the number one thing they're looking for is passion in the founder. And the reason is because you're going to get kicked in the stomach a lot. Like in the CPG side, you know, let's see, last week I was in Kroger's headquarters in Cincinnati. The week before I was in 2 Costco regions, you know, with my best suit on and, you know, ready to tap dance in front of them. The week before that it was at Trader Joe's, and the week before that at an Albertsons regional headquarters. So you're constantly putting yourself into this mode of, do you like me? Do you like my products? And, you know, 1 out of 4 times they say yes, and then, you know, that's the one time a year that they're reviewing that category. and you're like, oh man, they just said no, and I have to wait a year to come back with new products, a refined way to get in there, better data, whatever the history is. But the thing is, like, the good investors know that, because nothing is ever this super easy, like, here's the book, if you just follow this, you're going to be successful. 7 years later, someone's going to buy you out for 20 times, the money that we invested. It's a very, very difficult road that sometimes you sit in bed in the morning, you're like, oh my God, I've got to get up and like go lead this group of people with my passion. And you have to get that passion and find it every day. If you walk in the morning and you're just like, la 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 la, man, I'm just kind of coasting through this day, everyone reads it immediately. So you can see the office change in its dynamics based on certain leadership within the office and whether they're having a good day or a bad day. So a good entrepreneur knows that. And knows that that's the number one thing that an investor is looking for. Is like, is this person the person that when I write them a check, they're going to get up that morning that they've just been kicked by Kroger the day before, and they're still going to get up and lead this team through the next, week, month, year to come back to Kroger again. I think we had a pretty good meeting in Kroger, so that's just like an allegory, but that is what happens on a daily basis. You get kicked in the stomach. I always say it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That's what it is.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what both these guys said was really smart. For me, I felt like Greenling was completely passion driven. It was a mission oriented company. We didn't actually know how we were going to make all kinds of money, but we were driven to do it, and it was really hard. And passion was what kind of got us through. This company, I had a little more leeway to design it around margins and make sure the pieces were in place. And I feel like my passion right now, the company is values aligned and mission aligned, but I'm really passionate about the process. We do all of our own manufacturing, and I actually invented the machine that makes the noodles, and it makes it in a little different way than the other machines out there. And I think I got a higher rate and better qualities on a microbiological level. So there's passion throughout my company, but this one I don't feel like is necessarily mission driven. So it's an interesting difference. But I think it's built kind of on the foundation of what these guys said.
I want to add to that because that's a really awesome point of view. So when in Stubbs, coming out of my schooling, MBA, and then working for a couple years in the starting, I was like kind of young and idealistic, and you can get pretty passionate about barbecue and barbecue sauce. Like there was a lot of Memphis in May and Kansas City Royal Barbecue contests where you're up 24 hours trying to compete. That's a way of getting passion. You're going, just sit in front of people and cooking for retailers' headquarters, going to barbecue contests. And there was almost a mission there. And then as I shifted over to Rhythm Superfoods, like, I'm not a vegan and I'm not trying to tell people to be vegan. But the process itself and like how we're making these really incredibly nutritious snacks and the supply chain and how hard it is to make it and working with farmers and making sure the stuff gets there on time. It's almost like the passion for me is not so much in this founder, like I'm here to save the world by making everyone a vegan. That's not the passion that I find. Some of our employees do, but to me it's more of like the process this time, because that is a hard thing to do in and of itself. It deserves the respect. It's like every aspect of food safety and supply chain freshness and how do I get a better product on the shelf to someone, that deserves as much headlines as the person that is mission driven to save the world in some way.
I think both those are really good points, and you think about too, as you're building up your company and you're adding on people and you have this founder passion, how do you translate that to the rest of your crew? So, how important is having a good mission statement and core values, and what other leadership tools do you use to kind of instill that founder passion into the team that you're growing?
So Greenling, we had our core values, and I have a mixed opinions on a mission statement. We have one, but I don't particularly think it's as important as the core values. we had core values everywhere, and we were constantly talking about them. In this company, we don't have them written out at all. And I think what happened this time around was that I was strong enough in the core values that I hired people aligned with those values so that we didn't have to do a lot of reinforcement around it, because I already knew that was there. But when I saw that question, I was like, we don't even have core values yet written down. And then, and then they all instill that into their team just kind of naturally. So I think we kind of got lucky in getting the right people on board to move forward a set of values.
That's a cool insight right there. I'll just build on it a little bit. When we first started, we were a raw vegan snack company. That's not what the mission was, but that is how we produce things. And raw was this ethereal way of processing a product to be shelf stable, and that is low temperature dehydration to keep the enzymes alive. And there's a lot of hippies that get on the soapbox and talk about how that's the only way to eat. But there's 14 of them in Poughkeepsie, and if you believe them, that's your customer. But there's literally like 30 million other people that want to eat your stuff too. So I had an issue when we first started. Our mission, core value, mission statement, core value was very crunchy, and it was really built around a raw kind of diet. And as I started getting more uncomfortable with the lack of efficacy around that, and just I'm never comfortable preaching, and I'm more comfortable like aligning around fact. So even though there's still debates of whether non-GMO is dangerous and non-GMO is not dangerous, I always tend to lean a little bit, because the FDA tells you to, that you shouldn't be saying things on your packaging that aren't right, and unless there's some sort of real standard of science that says it. So for me, I started getting really uncomfortable, and that kind of trickles up over time until it becomes kind of a tidal wave. And so we're right now involved in kind of a realignment of our core values and mission, and we've got a company retreat coming up in the first week in November. So we'll actually, we've got an outside company that can help, facilitate that with all the stakeholders, all of our people involved. So I kind of felt a little bit like the tack was off, like we needed to reassess where we were sailing to. And so we'll go through that process again, and it's good to refresh those things. I called it a little bit of a pivot, because when we got deep into this, Whole Foods was starting a raw food section. 8 and 12-foot sections in their supermarkets had raw food sections. They don't exist anymore. And so we thought we were on the front side of a tidal wave that was going to also go out into conventional stores, and a few conventional stores did it. But then they retreated because there just wasn't a lot of manufacturers making products, and there was no alignment on what raw meant. So at the end of the day, 2 or 3 years into it, we were like, this is not good. We've been a little bit too focused and lasered on what is raw and what's not raw. And it got us down a couple of rabbit holes that luckily we were able to pull ourselves back from. There's a couple of our competitors actually call themselves raw, like there was Go Raw, and they made everything raw. And when the FDA decides to say there's no standard of identity for what raw means, and you're fooling people and telling them that it's not, that it's good and it's better for them, you'll have to take the word off your packaging. So that's a danger in the CPG space too, is what is the FDA talking about what I'm doing now, and what might they do in the future? Because that's a rabbit hole that you can get pulled out of pretty quickly.
I want to touch on kind of the pivot that you talk about, because that makes a lot of sense. So for us, our core values have been in place really since the beginning, but the mission to help people with psoriasis and eczema has flexed. So now we talk about really helping people with sensitive skin, but putting quality ingredients into our products that aren't going to do any damage, right? Hopefully it's helpful. So kind of flexing over the last few years has broadened our audience. When it comes to hiring and our core values, what I found is a lot of our team members resonate with my story. They have a similar story, whether they told me up front or we found out after they've worked for us for 6 months or a year that they went through something in their life a negative, that they somehow turned into a positive, whether it was a health issue, relationship, stuff like that. And that kind of is a kind of a thread throughout our team that I didn't consciously look for, but now I'm realizing, hey, maybe that's something I should look for more in our interviews and as we build out the team long term. So it's a small thing.
Yeah. Do you guys have any questions? All right, we're gonna do a few. We'll get maybe a question or two now, and then we'll take like a full half hour or so for questions. But let's break it up with a question now. So.
Sure. Since you guys seem to be well positioned to answer this question, I do
Being
market.
on stage.
With a microphone.
So anyway, my question refers to actually building a brand where there isn't necessarily, where the customer doesn't know they're looking for it. And I know for you, I was in the supplement industry for a long time. You have to be really careful of what you say, which is why your original mission to help people with psoriasis and eczema, you can't really talk about that, and yet you still might want to, imply that it's great for those products. And how are you creating demand for a product that people don't know they want?
I just had a long conversation about this with the entrepreneur last week, and I feel like what I kind of came to in my mind is that if you're creating a new category, for me personally, if I'm trying to do it, I think having an anchor is important. It's a new category, but where are the people coming from that are going to adopt this new category, and anchor against that and start there and say, here's where people are and here's where you should be, and this will be better and you'll be happier and solves all your problems, kind of thing. So I think anchoring against something that is already in the marketplace can be at least a great starting point.
What was your anchor?
Pasta.
Maybe just a little offshoot to that, but the reason there are so many acquisitions right now in the CPG space is because the brands that have been around for 20, 40, 60, 80 years are on a downward flat or declining by 2 to 6%. If you look at things like Tony the Tiger, Frosted Flakes, and just any one of a number of items like that, without damning anyone that I like in the marketplace. Coca-Cola, it's just like, they have to have other things because Coca-Cola is declining by 2 to 6% in consumption every year. They're able to do things like, sell off certain assets to make things look good, but the entire Wall Street community has looked at these brands and they're like, wow, you guys are like down $19 billion in revenue in the last 4 or 5 years. That was a Forbes headline last February. And so the reason is technology has made it very, very easy for a person that decides that they want to start a CPG company. Let's call them their own little silo. I believe that rabbis that want to eat carrots on Thursday need to have a crunchy carrot that's kosher. So someone that wants to feed that community has the ability to have a voice through the technology, whether it's social media, your Facebooks, Instagrams, Pinterest. Websites seem to be like old-fashioned now with the younger community, but they're still there as a source of getting information. So in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s, what you did was you have Tony the Tiger, and he has 2 ads, one at 9 o'clock and one at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning on ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that reached 70% of all children 3 times. So they had this gross rating point system. If we just do this and stack the boxes high and let them fly, moms and kids will come in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and they will buy our product. So meanwhile, someone comes out with a really healthy granola, and they believe something. It's like, you shouldn't eat more than 200 milligrams of sugar in a single day. So someone's like, yeah, my kids are really crazy. They're bouncing off the walls. Suddenly, something hits them on social media, and now they've got a direct communication platform from a manufacturer or marketer straight to the consumer, and it's really, really cheap. You don't have to spend the $10 million. It may take longer to reach those people and to build momentum, but that's really kind of like, if you're the entrepreneur, it's up to you to use these resources that are now available to us, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, whatever. That's how it's being built. That's how all these small brands are becoming $20 and $30 and $50 million businesses, and then the CPG companies are like, wow, man, those Frosted Flakes are no longer selling like they used to. We better buy that granola company that is now selling granola to moms and kids, because if we don't, in 10 years we'll be down 30%, and Wall Street is beating our stock up, and unless we do something to change, I will be out of a job as CEO of Kellogg's. That's how the CEOs of big CPG companies think. It's like, I like my job, I like what I'm doing, but the old brands are no longer, I can't put an organic moniker on Tony the Tiger boxes and have moms believe that. That was, to this person, that's a different, characteristic than the mom that wants to buy organic granola for their kids.
I don't know if I have anything to add to that. That was enlightening. I'd say for us, kind of on Mason's point of an anchor. So seaweed, what I didn't know when I launched the business, but after spending the first 3 years traveling most of the year and demoing in stores around the country, people generally thought of seaweed as healthy, right? So it wasn't like, oh, what's this thing you're putting in your topical products? But they didn't know why. And then slowly the seaweed edible market started to grow a little bit. And then in 2016, the Korean beauty market really took off. And so had all these bigger brands telling the seaweed story. And people, there's 25,000 species of seaweed, but they think of seaweed as seaweed. So how do we differentiate, stuff like that? Those are things further down the road. But how do you get them to buy into seaweed? And the name of the company immediately gives us credibility within the seaweed space. So when you name, are you going into a market that, you want to have some flexibility and immediately resonate with the consumer? So just something to think about.
Yeah, I think all those points are really good. So it's like, find your anchor, piggyback on it, and then use technology to do more research. And especially if it's something that demands a lot of education, find those early adopters and bring them in quickly. So I think that's a good technique.
Question for Adam. Did you ever explore the possibility of what it would take to make medical claims on your product?
I did. The cost and time to do it didn't make sense for me. I didn't know if I had a product people wanted, and to go down and spend all that money before launching, I thought would have been very difficult. With that said, some unique opportunities have presented themselves, and for the last 18 months we've been developing something that will allow us to move more in that space, which is going back to my original mission. So kind of go back to the question a couple times ago. While I deviated from my original mission for the business, by growing it, it's given credibility, new opportunities that were unforeseen that now allow me to go back and hopefully accomplish what I initially set out to do. So again, kind of being, holding your dream a little loosely, you never know what the future holds. So no, and then in the beginning, but as you grow, it may become more realistic to do that as you have more capital.
And can I ask, do you have a ballpark of what you were quoted initially for getting that done?
Yeah, we would have to go through the FDA and have it approved as a drug. So you have two ways to go, right? You have a homeopathic and then a typical drug. And so under the homeopathic, there are some monographs that we could have played with, but how much risk are you willing to take? And for me, I was too risk averse to say, hey, let's go put a homeopathic monograph on our products and claim psoriasis and eczema, because that window, from everyone I was talking to, was closing pretty quickly. And I didn't want to grow to be a business then just to get sued.
Question for Adam, but also the panel. You guys all do very healthy stuff. Do you consider it a service versus a product, either externally or internally?
Just real quick, internally for us, we'll do a number every month, which is lives changed, which is a function or an equation we created based upon sales, what we think our retention rate is, and how many people we think we're actually benefiting. Let's say 3 out of 4 people like the product. So internally we'll do that. Externally, I don't preach too much about it.
Yeah, we don't either, but we do align ourselves around the service that we give within our own communities. So we really look at ourselves as a product-focused outward company to our consumers. But we're always trying to preach, within our group, you have to have something that you want to do within your own community. We're really big here in Austin with feeding the homeless. We've got Anthropos Arts, which is a group of folks that teach problem kids, musical instruments. They teach them how to play musical instruments, and they tend to stay in school longer and graduate. And then because we're a manufacturing plant, we're in Guadalajara, Mexico, we're putting our footprint down there. That's a community where we've got 140 employees there, and we have to go through all kinds of audits from the retailers. We've had 7 retailers that have come down since we moved down to our Mexican facility, and they want to make sure that we have a social endearment to us. We're not like riding through the kale fields with guys with whips, treating people badly. So we hold ourselves to a very high standard, and that's more of the service that we look at is internally. We are a service to our communities.
Yeah, I think we consider ourselves more enablers than service providers. We're enabling people to achieve their goals with their diet, and of course community involvement as well. We work closely with the food bank and such.
I think that's something that you see a lot in consumer products. And I don't know, I think maybe tech is going the same direction, but certainly in most of the consumer product companies that we come across and deal with, it is, there's definitely some kind of a mission for something greater than just the product itself. Yeah.
You spoke about the passion aspect earlier, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. When you have a new idea for a new product or a new business, is that passion there right away? Do you think, oh, this is a great thing, we have to do that? Or is it maybe a little more a gradual process where you get more passionate the more time you spend with that idea?
I would probably say, at least for this one, maybe the latter, but my personal passions create a gateway, and a product has to meet certain criteria for me to even consider it. And we've had a lot of retailers say, hey, create us a conventional version as well, and I just say no. Like I do not want to put vegetables in a clamshell that have pesticides on it or have the risk of pesticides on it. So there's this kind of criteria level, and then above that, certainly the more time I spend with it and the more things we do, the more passion builds around what we're doing.
And Mason used the term gateway, and one of the things that you learn from the bigger CPG companies, they have this gate staging process of development, research and development, and we try to implement it in our own company. So you set about, like, you've got a new idea, let's see if we can develop some precepts or concepts, someone in the kitchen making something, and then if you predetermine like what the success factors for that product are, say we're going to go get 100 people, and 6 out of 10 of them, 60% of them, have to like it at a 7 or higher, better, depending on what your Likert scaling is all about. And if it doesn't pass it, you say no. And so all the big CPG companies do that. That tends to, like, I know I have to do that because otherwise I put 100 different items a month into the eyes of our research and development and marketing people. But there's something slow about that, and like not from the gut. And as a CEO of an entrepreneurial company, some of it has to be logic-based, but some of it has to be like, I just know it in my gut because I'm living and breathing this company. This is gonna work. I've got one right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to slip it into our cycle without pissing off all of my VPs, and because they keep me from coming up with 100 ideas a month, and you have to, otherwise you're chasing rabbit holes left and right. So I've got this one thing that I just know it's like a $50 million idea. I know it deep in my heart, but as I brought 3 people into the office on Friday, it's like everyone's got their arms folded, like what's he got on his table today? So there's discipline is important, and the staging and what's successful goes on to the next stage. On the other side of it, there's a balance there of you have to know your industry, your business, what the marketplace is like, and hopefully if you're good, the data will show that your ideas often, when you're really certain like I am, that you're right.
Well, like Scott, I got a lot of ideas, right? Not all great ones, so having the discipline to figure out which ones to bring to market. And to give you a real life example, when I launched the business, I launched with 28 SKUs. I ballooned that up to 48, and you can imagine what that did to our working capital. It was all sitting in inventory, which created massive cash crunch. Ended up reducing that back down to about 20 products, and then we've been building back up ever since. So I lacked the discipline earlier in the business to understand that not every idea is a good one, but also passion, I think, kind of ebb and flows, and that purpose is kind of your baseline, right? So I'm super passionate about creating new products. I like going and talking to people, engaging with consumers. There's other aspects of the business, like closing out the books, that I was never passionate about, and was a chore. So, but the purpose of getting that done so I can analyze, so I can see if I can create new products. So understanding that you'll have these kind of ups and downs along the way, and that your purpose will be get you through those times where you feel passionless about what you're doing. It's not going to be what you envisioned today. So.
I have a question for you guys on that one. So how do you know when to trust your gut? Like, how do you keep your gut clear? Because sometimes, you know, your gut may be telling you something that's just way off. And so how do you know when it's real?
Yeah, I try to always like my ideas, but never be in love with them. Like, be ready to drop them. And even this company, by the time I had a product on the shelf in the first store, fully branded, I was still ready and willing to drop the entire company if it didn't sell off the shelf. And that was hard, because it took a lot of work and a lot of research to get there. But to me, I know that I've got 100 ideas a day, so anytime one doesn't work, it's fine. I can go on to the next one. And I've seen a lot of CPG companies, you know, really have to try to push something to the market and struggle to do that and rebrand and all these things where, like, maybe the product market fit just wasn't right, the price point wasn't right, or there's something wrong with the product, and I didn't want to get stuck in that trap. So even though I've had a really strong gut feeling that this was going to be a new product category in the value-added shelf, I was ready to drop it even once I got there. And so to me, it's trust and verify. I always trust that there's something there if my gut believes in it, but then I need to do the research to back it up and make sure that timing is right and all the different aspects that go into it.
We've got a really good board of directors, and so we always bring all the ideas and the stages as we move along the R&D side of it, and I was lucky enough to have that. So sometimes good, like if you bring, I remember at the fancy food show, there was this lady, it's like Mary Jane, we'll call her. She's from North Carolina. She had this booth. She'd spent $4,000 at this trade show, and all her friends told her she had the best chutney that they've ever had. And I was like, well, what does that mean, the best chutney? Like I don't even know what chutney is. Tell me more about it. So, but she was raving, all of her friends, all of her relatives, you've just got the best chutney. And I'm like, man, so how big is chutney? So a Nestle company, Cross and Blackwell, sells like $2 million a year. They're the number one seller of chutney. And there was another Indian company that came along and they sold another $2 million. It was more like Indian mango chutney. But like chutney's not that big a deal. So even though her friends were telling her, like, you got the best chutney, it may not be the best idea to like start a company selling chutney. It's just not there yet. So part of it is having that that group of people that are willing to be honest with you. And our board of directors and even my CFO, you know, Allison, is just like, I go to her, I was like, all right, you're the one that has to tell them the truth. I'm going to tell them that the glass is overflowing all the time because that's what my nature. But you got to keep us like honest. So you're the one that does that. So a little bit of that, like having the right people around you at SKU. I'm always really careful. You have, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people that have just been doing the business for a year or so. They come in and they're get these great mentors that sit around a table and try to give them advice. And I'm always like, look, I'm going to give you some opinion, but I'm going to tell you when it's opinion. I'm going to tell you when it's fact too. Like if you're going to present to Costco, they are going to margin that up 14%. That's a fact. But if I tell you your packaging is horrible, that's just my opinion. So get some more opinions. And so I would just say, like, having enough honest people around you that are told to be honest is real important.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of holding your ideas loosely. But you have to have a balance of that as well. So I had two specific things. I remember telling my dermatologist, my last appointment, that I was quitting my job and starting this seaweed-based personal care line to help people with psoriasis, and he left. And then at my lowest point, I was at a Capital. It was like 2013. I went to my dad. I'm like, you know, a low point here. And he's like, well, you started the company out of an emotional decision. You didn't really think through it. you should quit and go back into real estate. And I was like, thanks, Dad. And I told the story at a panel, and he was in the crowd. And but I used that as motivation. But it was trusting my gut that eventually I'd figure this out. Right? I didn't have the right idea. We didn't fly off the shelf. We're not an overnight success story by any means. But trusting the gut that, okay, I'll figure it out. Listen to people. Have great mentors around you that say, hey, your packaging's okay, but what if we adjust here, or have you thought about doing this? And listening. So from that standpoint, having a good sounding board, I didn't really have that the first couple of years, and that I think hurt the growth of the business. Now that we have it, and over the last 4 years, it's made a huge change, not only for me as an entrepreneur and trying to lead business, but in the execution of the business and the products that we sell as well.
Right, so this leads into another question about advice and mentorship. I mean, having great mentors is super important and can drive you forward quickly. Same with advice, but how do you know who to pick as mentors? How do you know what advice to take and what advice not to take? Because I hear that a lot from entrepreneurs. Like, you get a lot of advice, and how do you weed through it all?
I always try to understand where they're coming from and where the advice is coming from. So who is the person and what are their experiences that lead them to this advice? And so I end up always trying to have just a handful of close advisor mentors. I think it's hard to maintain, give people enough information to speak intelligently about a topic if you have more than 3 to 5 advisors. Now, board of directors get out reports and they have a certain level of knowledge on it, but then there's other people that I want to have intimate knowledge in a certain area. So I pick the functional areas that I know are going to be the hardest, or that I have the most deficit myself in, and then I find someone who's an expert in that area and try to get them up to speed on where I am in that particular realm, and then carry them through. And my mentors always kind of, they have a little life cycle, and if they're really great in the early phase, sometimes they're not so great in the incremental growth phase, and so then they'll fall off, and I just don't call them as much, and I find a new mentor that I think has the expertise in that area. And everyone, early tenant that I read was like, everyone has to eat lunch. And so I would ask people to lunch and ask that if I could buy them lunch, and I've literally only had one person that absolutely never said yes. I pursued him for 3.5 years, and he was finally like, look, I just don't think it's ever going to work out. And I'm like, okay, you could have said that 3 years ago. Like, you just kept saying, call me again in 6 months. So I'd call again in 6 months, and that went on and on. But other than that, everyone has at least agreed to a lunch, and then if they like me or they like the idea, then they'll have another lunch, and then they can formalize the engagement.
Yeah, so having gone through some good and bad board times, mostly board members, not necessarily advisories, but the board I have right now is like really into the CPG space, and like they live it on a daily basis. So right now I'm lucky. There's been times in the past where I haven't, and I have one board member that was just adamant, like from day 2, when are we going to be profitable? Let's really focus on profitability. And I'm like, we're just doing like $2 million in revenue. We're spending $2 million more on running the company. So we're going to be losing money for 5 or 6 years, and that's just the nature of this, of our company. What we wanted to do, we wanted to grow fast, and so taking on investors was about shoveling in the shortfall of your cash burn. But he knew that coming in, but he couldn't help himself. He was old school. It was like, as you grow, you've got to be profitable, like by the 2nd or 3rd year. Otherwise, it'll never be valuable. And I was like, well, kind of everything I see out there in the space, companies that are growing at 30 to 50% a year are being acquired for their multiple of revenue, and they're all bleeding cash. So this is a new day, and so sometimes you'll get into that struggle where there's not alignment on the board. He happened to be one of the loudest persons in the room, so he affected some of the decisions that we made. I regret that from the very beginning. When you have discord on your board, it's really dysfunctional for the rest of the company. You decide specific trajectories and what your capital expenditures are going to be and what the budget's going to be, and that can affect what's going on. So if you've got someone that's off on their advice, it's a real problem. So even though I knew I had it and this was a problem, people were coming up to me after board meetings like, hey, we got to really do something about this. It took us a couple of years to get it done just because by the authority vested in him, he was a board member, and to take that authority away is difficult. So measuring the advice, I mean, that's the entrepreneur. When we're at SKU, as I said before, I like to tell people, it's like, I'm about to say, you know, fact, and now I'm about to say, you know, my opinion, and you've got to be able to fight between those two and ask the people whether that's fact or opinion, because everyone's got opinions, and if you're like getting 72 of them a day, it's hard to filter them and make that decision, but ultimately, that is your job. Go out, find out what's going on in the marketplace, what people feel about the packaging that you've just done, decide who you're going to believe knows something and doesn't know something, and then make that decision.
Kind of to drive home Scott's point and give SKU a 30-second endorsement. At the end of 2013, again, I didn't know what to do. I was trying to run a profitable business. We'd grown, you know, just reached about $1 million in revenue at that time. But I realized that all my competitors were gaining shelf space and they didn't really care about being profitable. So if you're the only sane player in an insane space, then you're the idiot. And so I kind of woke up to that fact. And I met Dan Graham, who's on the SKU board, and he said, hey, all these challenges that you're facing, you might want to consider this incubator. And I was hesitant, ended up going and presenting, and they accepted, and I went into it, and I took it very seriously. So through the program, you know, I have all these mentors, and I'd take as many lunches as I could, and that gave me a kind of a network. And then you filter out to who you like talking to, who gives good advice. And over time, you see there's a difference between founders, guys who've started businesses from the ground up, and then CEOs who've come in to establish businesses. And it's good to kind of get the opinion of both, even though we're coming from the more entrepreneurial perspective. But fast forward, as you keep in touch with people, I kind of had, obviously the SKU experience led me to getting in front of the private equity firm that backed the company, which allowed me to then go hire people who knew a lot more about me. And through that experience, I got in touch with a guy who, if I could pick one person to be my mentor within the consumer packaged goods space for personal care in natural, it'd be this guy. And so I kind of kept in touch with him, and then he ended up selling his business to a much larger conglomerate, and I knew that had happened, called to congratulate him, and then I said, any chance you want to join our board? Fully expecting he'd be like, thanks Adam, but you know, you're way too small for me to waste my time. But he said yes. Obviously we were compensating him for his time with some equity. And so now he's all in, right? He's on our board meetings, he's somebody I can pick up the phone and call. And it's changed my whole perspective on what the business can be. Instead of looking through this, he sees, you know, he's been at the top of the mountain. And so having a mentor for me is very, very important, having multiple mentors. And that's the great thing about Austin, that's the great thing about SKU, is that it opens up this whole community of people. There weren't events like this, you know, in 2010, 2011, when I first came to Austin. So now having these resources, I think, makes it a lot easier for you guys as you start businesses to get in front of people like Scott and Mason to talk about your idea.
How much equity did you offer the mentor, if you're willing to disclose?
I won't get into specifics, but it's based upon time, right, on the board. So every quarter that he's involved, he gets a little bit vested up to a cap. And what you find when somebody has, even if it's, you know, 0.5%, whatever, they have equity, it's a different conversation. Now they're connecting you with their you know, lead scientist from their old company who's now at a new manufacturer. Now they're putting you in touch with a buyer that they became friendly with over the years. So really game changer, but being selective in that, right? If you have a bad board member, it flips pretty strongly against you.
So concept, cost, and market acceptance kind of drive if your product's successful or not. How are the new sort of drivers like sustainability, locally sourcing, environmentally sourced stuff that's sound? What are these new sort of things that allow consumers that they're aware of and they're curious about?
What's the question?
So what are the other drivers beyond things like cost and market acceptance? Like, you know, as a consumer, if I'm interested in sustainability, is that something that is critical that you're seeing in the marketplace? Or environmentally sourced materials, locally sourced materials in your case? Like, I know, what are the other things that consumers are interested in and they're paying attention to?
Gotcha. I mean, I think you named a bunch of them right there. And there's ingredient integrity, there's sourcing, both location and source integrity, and supply chain transparency is a growing trend. So understanding where the product is coming from and how it's made, what kind of processing is used in it. So I think people are expecting more transparency in their products, and because there's lots of products out there that you can't trust and that you have no idea what's in it, and often there can be bad things in that product that can ultimately even be dangerous to people as allergen diets grow. So, you know, I think company and products that's kind of grouped into what I would call authenticity is where the marketplace is going.
We're making organic snacks and have been for 6.5, 7 years now. So sometimes you like get a little complacent, like, well, we're making organic snacks, so like that's as clean and good as you can get. So let's talk about it, and we do talk about it. We had an issue when we wanted to launch our beet chips, and we knew that they were going to be well received, and they have been well received, but we could not get the supply chain of organic beets where we knew we could get delivery of those beets like every day. And when you're in the, as Mason is too, you're in the world of processing something within like 3 days or 4 days of it being picked, and you have to. Supply chain is really, you're in the produce industry. Like, you're definitely in the produce industry, but even though we're making snacks, we are too. We pay more attention to what's going on in the farms, and
We talked about sharing a bee farmer.
yeah. And so we couldn't get organic for our launch. We couldn't absolutely assure ourselves, and when I say assure ourselves, like, I need beets growing in 3 different regions 100 miles away from each other, so that if a storm or something, you know, God's will happens, that like I still have beets, because I still have 140 people showing up to make them that day, and there's only so much sweeping of the floor you can do when you don't have raw materials. So for us, we kind of like, oh my God, this is the first time we're gonna have to like make this decision of whether we launch them or not. So we're GMO free, which is genetically modified free. That's how we launch them. And meanwhile, we worked triple time to try to find enough farm acceptance from 2 to 3 farmers. Once we got it, we are now like, okay, we're relaunching this as an organic item. And organic wasn't like one of our, you know, core disciplines. You know, healthy, nutritious density, all that kind of stuff was, but that was a big part of it. I think I wanted to shift one other thing is packaging. The penultimate of, you know, sustainability in packaging is finding something that's using a renewable resource to make it, and then maybe it's either recyclable or it can compost very easily. And in the bag packaging arena, where you're doing things into a bag like we are, no one's figured it out yet. So all those bags have 2 or 3 different films on them. One of them is there to keep oxygen, one of them is to keep light, one of them is to keep moisture out. Some of them keep all of it out, but you've got these 3 films that are bonded together, and that's what makes a Dorito bag or our bag. The ones that have come up that are like compostable, like they're incredibly loud and crinkly, so no one wanted those, or they actually compost quicker if they've got enough oil in it, so your bag, your product goes bad on the shelf quicker than if it wasn't. So to me, I look for the sustainability of what we do. I know we're growing stuff in fields and harvesting it and dehydrating it at low temperatures, so I know we're doing good, but the packaging side is still something I seek to like reach the golden ring.
And on the personal care side, a little bit different, but vegan, cruelty-free are the 2 main drivers right now. And then packaging, so our bottles, we're 100% post-consumer recycled plastic. We've been able to do that. It's a lot easier to do than on their side, but even taking a step further. So I've been going up to Maine every June and harvesting seaweed for 2 weeks. We do it, and that's it for the whole year. And when I first started, nobody blinked an eye. The last 2 years, all of a sudden there's tremendous interest, both from kind of the media community, and then from our retailers, and then even our own internal team members to actually go up and get their hands dirty and do it and see kind of the transparency of supply chain. They want to go experience what makes your products different. So this past year was our first time we actually brought up most of our sales team, and they were able to go harvest seaweed. And that was not something I thought about a few years ago, because harvesting seaweed isn't cool, but it's becoming cooler over time, I guess.
So we've heard about your past from you gentlemen, and you're all definitely inventors and come up with a lot of ideas. Have you ever had an idea that you really believed in, but that just failed?
I can take that one. Yeah. So before this, I had a great idea I was very into fantasy sports, and so I created this whole commodities market where you had underlying, anyways, long statistical analogies, and this was 2006, 2007. I wasted about $30,000 in my own money on it, realized I had no revenue model, and then the market crashed. All these kind of hedge funds that had interest in it went away, and it taught me a lesson that, number one, you should understand your revenue model for whatever business you're in before you start. So, picking and choosing who and where you're going to sell your stuff. So that was a failure, and probably had others along the way, but that was the top of mind one.
Definitely had individual product failures, for sure. I could list half a dozen or a dozen of them. But there was an idea that never got off the ground. I spent a lot of time on it. It was before I started Rhythm Superfoods. And there's a guy here named Rip Esselstyn who wrote a couple good books, but the first one was Engine 2 Diet. He was a firefighter here. UT All-American swimmer. Great-grandfather started the Cleveland Clinic Heart Center. Grandfather and father both were surgeons at that place. So had a lot of familial efficacy of health. And so he has developed this whole thesis of how to reduce your cholesterol levels and blockage in your arteries. And it's factual. You can see the studies that they've done. And so I thought that whole concept and his kind of notoriety was something that could be a great company. So another friend of mine, Clayton Christopher, and I started working with Rip and a couple other folks to develop a whole product line around it. And we went into developing the product line, how things would look, what year we would launch different things. Started talking with co-packers, started putting the business deck together to go raise money, put the contracts together to bring Rip's IP, his brand name, and him into the company. And meanwhile, John Mackey from Whole Foods had read the same book and was really interested in getting Rip over to Whole Foods to become kind of his vegan star. And in the end, was really persuasive to Rip. And after putting 8 or 9 months of work into the whole thing, we really hadn't locked it all down yet. And John Mackey was super, first of all, influential because he is John Mackey. Here in town with the biggest natural organic, supermarket in the country, and needing some leadership there. So he was able to convince Rip that this was a better idea to bring his whole thought process, IP, everything into Whole Foods. And in the end, we tried to have a couple of meetings with John and convince him that they were not good at developing out product lines and should let us do it. We would give them the first 6 months, exclusivity of the products. So I was heartbroken, I was so wrapped around it and excited about it. And then in the end, hadn't really done the legal side of it quick enough and should have done it earlier. So that was one that never really got off the ground, but was a failure of time spent.
Yeah, and then he really struggled within that organization because he was trying to be an entrepreneur and thought he was going to get all the support. And they're like, no, you get 2 staff members and you get no particular budget beyond that. So he really struggled with that. For myself, I would say most of my ideas don't work at the time. People say, how many companies have you started? I'm like, well, how do you define a company? And I ended up having to decide that I define it by getting to revenue. I had a company and someone gave me money for that product or service, and in that case, I've actually started 6, but 2 of them not worth mentioning at all. But I've actually created business models probably for 24 different companies and got them to various levels. Some of them never even get really out of my head. I start to tell someone, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave this one alone. And then others, I can tell people about it, and they're like, oh, maybe that's cool, but there's some big factor that means like I'm not gonna go pursue it, either too much capital to get into it, or various things. So I've had a lot more ideas that don't work than the ones that do.
I'd like to follow up on the sustainability question that we had earlier. I just moved here from Portland, Oregon, where sustainability, organic food is really big. And so far it seems to me that's the same case here in Austin. But what are some challenges, what are the future trends that you expect when expanding across the US, organic food, quality food, sustainability?
Well, the General Mills Venture Group 301 Inc. is one of our investors, and not that I get any sort of inside look, but I pay more attention to the big aircraft carrier that is trying to make little 1-degree turns every year. And I was reading how they were going, 2 weeks ago they announced they were going back to the artificial colors in the Trix cereal because the colors just weren't vibrant enough, and kids were depressed when they looked at the bowl of the carrot-based coloring that they used. And but I know behind the scenes how big a deal it is. Like when you want to make Cheerios non-GMO, it may take them, with their supply chain of like 1,000 farmers that don't have organic fields or don't even know what non-GMO means, and they've got silos and mills that run conventional as well as non-GMO and organic, different grains. It's really, really hard on the supply chain side to turn big brands into something that they're not, which is why the smaller brands are able to go in and say, oh, well, I am going to be organic, and I'm going to make something like a cereal, and all my ingredients are going to be organic. And those cereals are usually like $6 for 8 ounces of cereal, and there's like 25 ounces for $1.99 of Cheerios because they've got their supply chain so tight. So I at least understand how hard it is, and there's constant pressure on these big companies, particularly from Wall Street, to change the way they're doing things. But they've got these assets that are like in place and running, and the train is moving, and it's really hard to like stop it or slow down. We're making Cheerios, the supply's coming in. The Chobani yogurt company taught everyone else in yogurt a lesson. Like, you can blink and the consumer's behavior will change immediately. It's not necessarily sustainable, but a different type of product. And that happens with organic or non-GMO products. They come out, they become uniquely identified differently than the conventional item that's out there, and suddenly they're taking the share away from these big companies. So right now, it's all these small entrepreneurial companies. Their success is causing the big companies to change, but they just can't slap like an organic label onto Trix and make the consumers that love Trix change the way they want to behave. So it's a gentle balance that is an opportunity for all entrepreneurs, because you can start your company today, and 5 years later, some big company is very interested in having the mojo that you have, and you see that announcements, headlines every week. There's a couple more CPG companies that are $10 to $50 million in sales, and the big company wants to buy them out.
Sustainability encompasses a whole lot of things, and so trends like sustainability is hard for me to, because within that, and it also means something different to everyone. Just in terms of general kind of trend towards better for you products, I think there's a lot of categories that just haven't, that mantra hasn't even really gotten out there. So there are definitely opportunities for better for you products in categories inside the store. And then also, I think I think we'll continue to see a fragmentation of product categories into specific markets, some more market niches, and which will lead to, I think, fewer Coca-Colas of the world, but then a whole lot more main root sodas and regionalized products that have a super intense following in one area and then just can't even get into another market.
I think too, when you guys are talking about this, you see, like, for example, Honest Tea is a really good example of this. So they, I can't remember, what is the guy's name from like the founder? Seth. So, when he started it, he got it up to where he was, X million dollars, and they were importing 4 containers of organic tea, and then they sold to Coca-Cola, and then it's like, okay, they're importing 25 containers of organic tea per month. So, I think when these organic brands build up to a certain level, and folks like Coca-Cola or General Mills are interested in acquire, it really can do a lot for sustainability, but it's like it's on the smaller brands to really create the demand for it. And I think that a lot of that is influenced too by how the economy is doing. When the economy is flush and people have more capital, that there's a lot more ability to spend a little more. Or even, you see some consumer trends now where people are trying to consume less but higher quality. So it's a combination, I think, of a whole different number of things. But the trend is going that way, but it's always kind of with the tricks, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so I think it'll continue to go that way, but it's probably going to be kind of, like this.
So it feels like a 2-part question. I'll try to break it up as easily as possible. So different levels of experience, failure with, or kind of not the exit you wanted with Greenlee, right? And then you've had the exit that you dreamed of with Stubbs, I think, and then you're in the middle of your first grill. So I like the blend of experience between the 3 of you. I'm curious, appetite for learning new things and the challenge that you have as you continue to build upon what you've learned, and then also kind of looking forward, how do you continue to have that appetite, or do you have the appetite and interest? And I shouldn't just assume you do, but can you explain kind of that path for you?
I think that's a really fascinating question, and it's something that I struggle with as an entrepreneur. Is always, what's next once I see something coming to the end of its life cycle. And so, to me, what I always want to be able to do, I don't ever want to do the same thing again, because I have that passion for learning and for doing new things, and I want to understand different types of businesses and aspects of business. But I always want to take what I've learned already. And so to me, that looks like where the resources that I have gained and the network and the connections that I have, where can I turn and then focus it on a new business where, like, after this, I don't think I'll do another CPG product. But, well, it might be a CPG product, it might be a product, but it won't be in the industry that I'm in. But I think it'll be in a related industry. So where I can leverage all the people that I met and the connections that I made, but then move on to something new that allows me all those challenges over again, and where it feels like mostly like a brand new business, but also with some familiarity that I know I can hit certain things.
And intellectual curiosity is like the main driver for me personally. That's just, you either are that way or you're not. It's like, I hope my kids are that way, but like, I just fascinated by reading business. I love the technology money that's come into the CPG and food side. I may not like the result of what has been invested in it, but they're trying to disrupt the way we think about food in general. And so that's pretty amazing to me. I love watching that. I definitely have one more in me, if not 2. I'm driven by wanting to start something, but like, I'm not ready to leave what I'm doing right now. So if we're lucky enough in the next 2 to 10 years to sell Rhythm to someone that can bring it to the next level, I'll probably be in a wheelchair, but I still want to start another company, because I love it. I love providing a vision that some other people get onto my canoe and start paddling with me. That's a lot of fun. It's a lot of stress too, starting from the very beginning. A lot of stress. But I've got a Rolodex and know how to do the CPG space. So that's like, what do? Do you like wake up the next day and say, no, I want to go into, I'm going to go learn how to write code and make the best killer app ever. Like, that's 10 years in the making for me just to be able to write 100 lines of code. So I'm not going to do that. But enjoy doing it. I definitely have one more in me, if not 2.
And like these guys, willingness to learn is probably my biggest thing, and my mentality shifted. Before it's like, when are you gonna exit, this type of thing. Now I really don't see, there's no finish line. There's nothing I'm sprinting towards. The business is growing. If and when we exit, that'll be great, but I'd probably do the same thing as Scott. and Mason, I already have ideas that I've written it out, and then when the time comes and I have the time, I'd probably just start another business. So trying to enjoy this process, learn as much as I can from people that I meet along the way. So
I want to add something too, like, you know, both Adam and Mason and Jen and I are all like good friends. So on varying bases, we are having lunches and dinners and going to meetings and stuff throughout the year. But like, there's no formal connection that we have, but like we're in a unique town where people give so much of their time and their knowledge, and they don't say that in all the other towns. No, you can go to very, like maybe Boulder, but you know, you get a very different entrepreneurial ecosystem if you're going to go on the East Coast or West Coast. People keep their cards very close to their shelves. They think someone's going to steal their idea. The senior people in the room that have been there and done it 2 or 3 times don't have time. You know, they're partying in the Hamptons or whatever they're doing. But this town is unique, and you're going to see open doors if you want to start a company here in this town. The SKU, not just going through the SKU track, but SKU runs 3 or 4 happy hours a year trying to connect people together. And so one of the things I always tell people when they join SKU, it's not this little 14-week lesson program that you do. That's one of the things, and it's a lot of time early on. But you may meet originally 30 to 40 mentors that are willing to have lunch with you, spend 2 hours with you. Your mentor team's going to spend an hour or 2 per week throughout the entire thing. But it's the network afterwards. If you continue to network and be friendly with all of these people, and I mean, we still get together a couple times a year. We see each other. And you were in track 1 or track 2?
Whatever, 1 or 2.
5 or 6 years ago. And so he's part of the ecosystem just like I am, and Mason is as well. And so you'll see a lot of people give a lot more time in this town than you're going to find in any other town.
And to follow up on that, just real quick, one on competition. I used to be worried about it all the time. You know, what Scott's doing, what Mason's doing, what we're doing, it's so hard to replicate that I actually want more. You know, L'Oreal just came out with a seaweed shampoo, and I'm celebrating because now they're telling the story of seaweed to a larger audience. So from that standpoint, differentiating yourself enough and then having confidence that you're running a good business, that's really hard for somebody to come in and knock you off, at least on the personal care side. And then going back to the mentorship. So I met with Scott, you know, probably it was January 2014, first time I met him, and he reset my mindset. I meet with entrepreneurs now, and they say, oh, I want to own 51% of my business. Scott told me in our first meeting, if you end up with 10 or 15% ownership in your first consumer products company, that means you were successful. You're able to raise money and get diluted, but then you eventually exit. You have no track record, you know, are you able to raise capital, that type of thing. So that kind of changed my mind from me, like, I got to own 51% to, okay, let's raise capital, grow, I'll learn along the way, surround myself with good people. So that was just a small piece of advice that's always stuck with me that I kind of fast forward and tell people as well.
Collaboration, you go a lot further. Just to add a plug for SKU too, we do a lot more now at community events. We just did a social media workshop, and coming up in November we have just kind of a 2 or 3 hour get your finances in order workshop. So we're starting to do more workshops and kind of community events outside of the track as well. So I'd encourage you guys to look at all that. And we've got 5 more minutes just to wrap up, and I just wanted to hear from you guys maybe quickly the 2 or 3 things you think it takes to have it be successful in CPG.
Lucky because I get to start. I would say good mentors and persistence.
A good product. Not all of the products that we've made are good, and the consumers quickly tell you that. Just like Mary Jane from North Carolina, she may have had great chutney, but it's also like not a market that was prepared to be exploited. It's just not big enough. So good product, and sometimes you're making something like veggie noodle, like someone's at home with a spiral slicer doing it themselves, and there's probably some Pinterest people that are trying to figure out how to do it themselves, and some people doing it badly, but then someone's got to come along and create a package that says what it is, which is what they've done, put it in some sort of package that's able to sit in your refrigerator for a week or so or 2, and to figure that out is pretty cool. So you have to have a good product. The Stubbs barbecue sauce, the thing that was so easy to get passionate about is you would put 4 or 5 other competitors' barbecue sauces in a retailer's office that you're begging for shelf space, and you'd pour all 5 of them out in Stubbs, and it just tasted better than all the other ones out there. So it made the selling part easy. So, you know, good product, also have to be able to raise money. When I was giving the advice to Adam about, you know, don't worry about owning 10 or 15%, that doesn't always work for everyone. Some people want to own 100% of it, and it's a lifestyle company, and they're able to move along at a different accelerated rate. On the other hand, you're able to do more and work faster and not have competitors come after you. I mean, it's every time you think you've got a brilliant idea, there's not the tech equivalent is there's a 16-year-old kid in a garage somewhere that's about to, you know, put Microsoft out of business. That's like the moniker that people think about. It is the same in the CPG space. So if you go to Expo West or Fancy Food Show in San Francisco next year, January, San Francisco Fancy Food Show, Expo West is March in Anaheim. If you see a brand new product like bone broth, I saw the first bone broth there like 3 years ago, and by the next trade show, there was like 10 bone broth companies. So you think you got an idea, if you don't move fast, someone else will be the brand that gets all the shelf space. So even though you don't have to take investment to get diluted to only be the 10 or 15% person, in the advice I was given to Adam, it's like, you know, you want to own this spotlight of the single company that has this like identification. And if you don't move fast, someone else will, and the only way to move fast is with capital. So that's why I was given that specific advice.
So my 2 pieces of advice, I'd be naive, right? I thought we would be 3 years, we'd be, you know, doing tens of millions of dollars and all this stuff. But you have to have this overconfidence initially kind of in the beginning to get started. Otherwise, if you saw all the challenges ahead, most people would turn around. So you're here listening, and again, having these mentors who can kind of guide you is a huge benefit. The other thing I would say is, what's your personal financial situation? Understanding that it's going to take twice as long as you foresee. Are you going to be able to withstand that from a personal perspective? You know, do you have kids, wife? Like, I was fortunate. My wife was my business partner, and she took graphic design classes and took a whole portion of the business off my plate. But at the same time, both our incomes was dependent on the seaweed bath company. So that created a lot of pressure. Luckily, we were able to work through it as a team, but being honest with yourself. Okay, you think it's going to take 2 years till you can take a salary, or 4 years, who knows? So understanding that, and that also leads itself to, can you raise capital, which can take some of that pressure off.
Great. Thank you guys so much for all the advice and wisdom. And thank you all for coming. It's been a great experience here to listen to these guys. So thanks so much.
July, so I'm doing my own thing. Kind of helping everyone stuff out in positions and how's that going? How's the company going?
Yeah, well, he's represents range system. He's goals and every regulation is very high. I had yeah, he might take over stuff like that. So he's looking at now. It sounds like he's going to do all as well as yeah, that's it. That's like science. Starches. How do we make that people are going to really, I feel like, have that experience go back really rapid about it, really that experience is what I learned. So it's very cool to pizza, that experience. I gotta know anything. That's really hard. She has products. And also dynamic
that brought in over 50,000 They're great info sessions on the Austin Startup Scene and how to be effective, things like that. Startup Scene from you guys know and then you go to giant office around town.
So these guys are just trying to get out. I looked at the value added.
Out there to thrive, the startup world is such a fun way to that's the thing that's on your radar. That is but that leads me to co-working. They're all trying to part of the passion factory is that we are the interesting thing about our
Yeah, we haven't actually connected yet.
Great story. We found really did home with it.
That was where the yeah, exactly. Are we missing something? And they're like, no, you're not missing anything. You just gotta hammer it out.
So when you're here, not only are our resources with your experience
Finally, making strides out there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a drop in your entire life. Like, oh, now we're finally you know, yeah, Target. I asked the existing they wanted to actually their philosophy.
Let's go this way. This one will be a little fun. We'll probably have to
I'm gonna send you a
I don't know where that boy Austin, while you're here.
Filming on everything, and I might be able to help a little bit. It's not always fun to be that. Go say what you need then.
Yeah, we use zucchinis, potatoes, but I got the No, it's nationwide. We do sell food here. We also sell HEB, Central Market,
Pull from the roster. Yeah, so I had a good picture.
yeah, it's a package.
Got the download up for you're next to but again, I said, you know, if you and whoever else you watch it for, it's over here.
It's another avenue. It's like
Sneak this way. Sorry, guys.
no, some of them are just like this section. But for those who make
Exactly. So it's just like in the same way.
Good to meet you. Fact or opinion? Well, there's a little bit of both. You make sure to clarify whenever you try something different. Yeah. That's a big deal. Yeah. No, I just when you switched over from full-time job to yeah. So I had this like my life girlfriend that I moved up to the Northeast for this shoppers me. I found myself in an area that kind of I was like, I've got to start a barbecue sauce company. That's totally wild. I had two friends, John solving John in our minds, I was supposed to run the whole
Is that right? Yeah.
Anybody, well, you know anybody there?
Yeah.
Not really, but it's the same thing with, well, I guess I've been to start a barbecue. It's just kind of their unit.
Yeah, it's really like that. And investors that don't know anything about it, or
Well, it just really, you know, it's right for MBA, anybody like this. So, insurance for like, okay, this is great. I know. So, glad I have your support in this. But so you, at that point, you guys didn't what you did once in the barbecue sauce, but better stuff is
Before to
Yeah, wasn't really being pasteurized.
When was your last time you actually had space between that last room? No escaping, apparently.
We've been around here for But then again, you also get
It's actually average, or maybe slightly better than average, but just sheer form.
It's a good problem.
What are you doing here? I guess you're right, you're probably literally working on
Well, yeah, but you know, Chris and I know how to sell a product and
I love
market
those.
and run a business.
I'll get back to those when my shoulders, but hard.
It's hard. Uh-huh. It's hard to